The first verse of the book of Nahum tells us the book of Nahum is an oracle regarding Nineveh. This oracle was given in an historical context, so in order to understand the book of Nahum, it's helpful to understand the history of Nineveh and Assyria. Nineveh was a city in Assyria. Nineveh and Assyria are mentioned very early in the Bible. As you know, Genesis starts out with creation and the flood. After the flood, there was a Tower of Babel, where people were given different languages and they started dispersing around the world. Around that time, there was a man named Cush who became the father of Nimrod. We read the following about Nimrod in Genesis. Genesis 10:10. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went forth into Assyria and built Nineveh and Rehoboth-ir and Calah and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, that is, the great city. This is the first time in the Bible we see a reference to Nineveh and Assyria. We see that Nineveh was started as a city very shortly after the flood. The rest of the book of Genesis tells us about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They lived roughly 2000 BC. The books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy tell us about the Israelites leaving slavery in Egypt, receiving the Mosaic Law, and traveling through the wilderness for 40 years. That happened roughly 1500 BC. Joshua, Judges, and Ruth tell us what the Israelites did between 1500 BC and 1000 BC. That was a time when every man did what was right in his own eyes. 1st and 2nd Samuel tell us about David becoming king roughly 1000 BC. The books of 1st and 2nd Kings tell us what happened between 1000 BC and 500 BC. As I said, David became king around 1000 BC. His son Solomon ruled over the kingdom of Israel after David. After Solomon died, the nation of Israel split into two different kingdoms. There was a northern kingdom called Israel. There was a southern kingdom called Judah. David and Solomon's descendants ruled over the southern kingdom that was called Judah. After David and Solomon died, Nineveh and Assyria became very prominent in that part of the world. For a time, Assyria was the dominant power in the world. One of the kings that ruled over the northern kingdom of Israel was a man named Nahum. We read about him in 2 Kings. 2 Kings 15, verse 19. Pul, king of Assyria, came against the land, and Nahum gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, so that his hand might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his rule. Then Nahum exacted the money from Israel, even from all the mighty men of wealth, from each man 50 shekels of silver to pay the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria returned and did not remain there in the land. This was the beginning of a series of events where Assyria figured very prominently in the history of the nation of Israel. Later there was a man named Pekah who was king of Israel. We read about him and Assyria in 2 Kings 15. 2 Kings 15, verse 29. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and captured Ijon and Abel-Maacah and Genoa and Kadesh and Hatzor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and he carried them captive to Assyria. The king of Assyria carried many Israelites back to Assyria as captives. Later, the king of Aram and the king of Israel waged war against Jerusalem and the nation of Judah. Ahaz, who at that time was the king of Judah, appealed to the king of Assyria for help. We read about this in 2 Kings 16. 2 Kings 16:7. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and deliver me from the hand of the king of Aram and from the hand of the king of Israel, who are rising up against me. Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house and sent a present to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria listened to him, and the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and captured it and carried the people of it away into exile to Kir and put Rezin to death. In 2 Kings 17, we read about Assyria coming against the nation of Israel again. 2 Kings 17:1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea the son of Elah became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 9 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, only not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against him, and Hoshea became his servant and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, who had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and had offered no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. So the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the whole land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and carried Israel away into exile, and settled them in Halah and Habor on the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. So that is what happened. However, it's important to continue reading of verse 7 about why this happened. 2 Kings 17, verse 7. Now this came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods, and walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel, which they had introduced. Yahweh used Assyria as a tool to punish Israel for their idolatry. After Assyria exiled Israel, there was a man named Hezekiah who ruled over the kingdom of Judah. He also had problems with Assyria. Let's read from 2 Kings 18. 2 Kings 18:13. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will bear. So the king of Assyria required of Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah paid a lot of money to Assyria. However, the king of Assyria moved against Jerusalem anyway. 2 Kings 18:17. Then the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah with a large army to Jerusalem. So they went up and came to Jerusalem. Next, there was some dialogue that took place. Eventually, Hezekiah cried out to God and asked for help. God provided some help. 2 Kings 19, verse 35. Then it happened that night that the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians, and when men rose early in the morning, behold, all of them were dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home, and lived at Nineveh. It came about, as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon his son became king in his place. So that is a brief summary of the interaction between Nineveh and the Israelites. While God used Nineveh as a tool to punish the Israelites for their idolatry, God was not happy with Nineveh and the Assyrians and how they carried that out. God eventually brought punishment on the Assyrians themselves. There are multiple passages in the Old Testament where God gave his verdict and judgment upon Nineveh and Assyria. The book of Nahum is one of the books that contains God's pronouncements against Nineveh and Assyria and tell us what God thought of Nineveh. Thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please forward this to someone else who would benefit from visiting Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. My email list is free. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on email, and that will take you to a page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain.